I am Stacey, and it's been a really long time, and I've missed you guys. So thanks so much for bearing with me during setup. It looks like I'm having some weird audio driver issues with new installation of Windows 10. So I'm going to be on a headset today, and I apologize because the headset's not quite as good of quality as the normal mic that I use, but we will bear with it together, and hopefully everything will be okay. So, today we're going to be continuing Kentucky Route Zero. I'm so excited that new installments have come out. Probably won't get through the entire act today, but hopefully have some fun. And it's been a long time, so I sort of wanted to just kind of catch up and see how all of you are and tell you a little bit about the cool stuff I've been up to and just kind of chat and see how you are, reconnect. Hello. Um, so for me, I've been doing a lot of travel. Uh, First, I was gone for a little while to ELO, and then I was back, and then I was gone again. So this all started with me going to the ACM Hypertext Conference, which was a lot of fun. It's a conference that I used to go to. Like several years in a row. It was a conference that I was really actively involved in and then kind of dropped off a little bit when I came to grad school. And so Hypertext, like a lot of academic conferences, does a thing where they alternate which continents they're on every year. So it's almost always in a location that is really expensive to travel to, and that's why I haven't been able to go for the last few years. But this year it was in Halifax, so still a bit of travel from where I am in California, but not as far as Europe. And it was a lot of fun. They asked me to curate an exhibit as part of the creative track, which was an attempt to kind of get artists to come back to the conference because there haven't been, or there really hasn't been as much of an artist presence over the last few years. And so me kind of reaching out to artists and finding creative work to be involved in the conference was a way to kind of bring that presence back to this particular conference. It was a lot of fun. I was able to put together an exhibition that was 7 pieces, and the exhibition was really cool because it was kind of me trying to kind of play with the boundaries of what we call hypertext. So I'm really interested in works that exist at the boundary, right? So I mean, on this stream all the time, I'm streaming stuff that is, not necessarily your typical, sort of AAA game title, not always the kind of stuff that you normally see streamed on Twitch. And so this is a thing that I'm really deeply interested in. And I think in that respect, the exhibition was really a success. So yeah, it was super cool. I was able to get work from lots of different areas of hypertext. And there was kind of an interesting process by which we selected works with a group of jurors. And the jurors were really fantastic, came from lots of different sort of areas around games and hypertext and interactive art. And they were really fantastic. So the jury ended up selecting 7 pieces that kind of were interested in different things. So there was, for example, like a documentary piece and some pieces from, kind of more traditional parser-based IF, one piece from, the tradition of kind of the classic hypertext of the 90s, and yeah, lots of awesome fun stuff. So the information for that I'll be writing about for the blog, and we'll be posting a bit more about that. I also am going to be talking to some really cool folks about it coming up shortly, so do be on the lookout for that. And if anybody in chat is interested in me going more into that, totally ask questions. I'm really interested in talking more about it. But coming off of the back of that, I was so excited to see that Kentucky Route Zero had a new act released because this this is a game that has been really engaging with that tradition. So, okay, without much more, let's maybe get back to the game. Um, I am noticing, so I started up Act 1 to try to do a quick sound check, but I'm kind of feeling like there's not an easy way for me to change what act I want to play. So this might, uh, yeah, this might just go black for you for a second, and we'll get it back up. Okay, so, hey, hi Floop! I'm so excited to see you. It's been so long. Um, So my one greatest complaint about this game is that I feel like it's really missing some sort of recap. Even though it hasn't been as long between this act and where we would have been if we had played Act 3 when it was current, I still don't entirely remember what we were up to. So if chat, if you remember and want to kind of fill me in, I know that we were coming from a factory. Whoa, that's really loud on my end. Uh, oh, super cool. Okay, I'm gonna have to turn stuff down. Sorry, that's super loud. Um, and I did some sound checks, but nothing with that loudness. So if it's coming in super loud on the stream, let me know. But what a cool shot to open this with! Awesome. All right. A history state machine. Okay, so we see this character Will. I don't remember if we knew a Will before. Um, yeah, okay, and now I think the sound is back down to levels that we're used to it. Man, okay, so yeah, that opening shot was so good. The really loud kind of like sound, really engaging, kind of just like throwing you back into it, which is super interesting, right? Because we're sort of we're at the moment now in a 5-act drama where this is kind of the climax, right? So to have that audio cue of really throwing us back in, super cool way to kind of throw us right back in it. Okay. If left unresolved, gear slap can gradually throw limbs out of alignment and burn motions and decontextualize gestures. So this is super cool. This is a thing that, even though it hasn't explicitly made an argument yet, feels like it's putting itself in dialogue with the current sort of movement in VR, AR, and gestural interfaces, and I'm kind of interested to see where this is going to go. But, of course, this is also probably a reference to the artificial limbs, which our protagonist has just received, and we just spent some time in that factory. So let's see. So we have table of contents. Which it's interesting that it's having us click through each one of these, because what that does is that sort of forces the player to slow down and take it in. Love the jump from 2 to 4 there, particularly since 4 is order of operations. So if this is 3, then yeah, cute. Yeah. So I'm interested to see chat if you have feelings on what sorts of things we should select. So interestingly, the thing that is sticking with me from the previous installations is that it felt like our choices didn't really have too much of an impact. So I'm kind of interested to see. Okay, so we did have Junebug last time. I don't recall if Will was her companion, though. Alright. Mechanics are in short supply. I think the setting is too romantic. It scares them off. I absolutely love this mechanical mammoth, and I really want to know more about what's going on there. So we're down at the Echo. So I want to say we always end up here eventually. The river is like that. It always has been. Great. So the Echo is the river, and we looked at it a bit in the interstitial materials. Traveling down the Echo was there was super cool interactive choose your own adventure audio menu thing that we did. So yeah, here we are at the bottom of the Echo apparently. All right, we picked up the bureau. Okay. So this is nice. This is giving us a little bit of a recap, right? So when we last left our crew, they were sort of standing in front of the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces, and like there was kind of this gorgeous shot, and then we decided, I believe, to travel down the Echo. All right. So let's ask about the Zero. This old river rat steers clear of weird highways. Can understand. I've been traveling this river for more than half my life, more or less alone. I think I've seen it change quite a bit in all those years, but I can't say for sure. The water has a peculiar way of making a person forgetful. Ah, this is so nice. So, it feels like this is kind of directly engaging that thing that I was just talking about, where I feel like I don't really remember what was going on, and episodic content usually has a recap, and then this is kind of poking at that and saying, hey, you forgot, player, Stacey, and now we're going to poke fun at you a little bit, and I love it. Okay. Some nights I remember a place, but it's full of strange new people, and some nights I meet an old friend on an unfamiliar shore. Wonder which kind of night this is. So the setting for this game is so interesting because on the one hand, it's this very magical realist setting, right? Where on the one hand, uh, this feels like our world, but on the other hand, everything is kind of wrong, right? Like space doesn't really work the way space is supposed to. There's a bunch of kind of creepy supernatural stuff that seems to happen. Um, but then, maybe it is our world. Oh, but then maybe not because there's technology that doesn't exist. It's really interesting. Okay, so all we have here are these arrows, which I kind of love the listing here, and also the fact that this is off center, which is kind of interesting to me because this game is so aware of how it's framing shots in this very cinematic and theatrical way. So let's take a look. I like our little ponytail. Okay. Yep, let's stop and talk. Okay. Alright. Let's get a little bit of backstory about this. Gray in her pelt. So you have kind of this mix, right, where this is clearly a mechanical object, but mechanical objects don't normally have fur that grays as it ages. So yeah, the aging is a little bit different from what we might expect. I'm not really qualified for this work. Okay. So yeah, let's ask Will. What's your story, Will? I like to listen to them. Interesting. In that moment, I'm truly free. I don't even have any shoes. Yeah, so it's very like Huckleberry Finn, right? Um, I should tell you where I left my shoes. Do you know I'm a classically trained organist? No, that was not a thing I expected you to say, Will. Um, it's true, look at these long fingers and pedal gripping toes. It doesn't matter. A minor in French literature earned me a position teaching French things at a university. I was demoted to mopping floors, running wiring through walls, or in dangerous places. I even operated the soundboard at the student theater. So yeah, I commented previously about how the previous episodes felt like there was a lot of these sort of shots at academia, right? And it's something that we're seeing again, where you have this character that has this sort of, classical training and academic knowledge, and we see that kind of cast aside, and in this particular world, sort of regarded as less valuable or less important. Um, Walk without shoes for something important or tragic. And this feels a little bit like this character is critiquing this idealism that we see in a lot of college students. I think there's a few ways to read that. So I don't know. Maybe I'll hold off on comment until we get a little bit further. First subterranean waters. Kate brings me along, and I record what I see and hear. Anyway, that's all I try to remember anymore. I listen to the river's stories, and my own stories get farther and fainter. Oh, if you talk to Kate, could you ask her when she stops for gas, could she pick me up a scratch ticket? Okay. So let's keep going. Yeah, real folks who have left for Huckleberry Finn life. Oh my gosh, it's so cool! Ah, I love the visuals in this game so much. Okay. Alright. Thought I saw you squinting. It's hard water, you know. Alright. It's kind of an interesting exchange we're having with her. So I feel like this is the option that's going to keep the conversation going, so that's the one that I'm going to choose. I strain. Eccentric flavor profile. It's mushroom based. I'm a big believer in the fungal pharmacy. Which is kind of like an interesting parallel to the fungus that we saw growing on the Xanadu. Let's ask about the dog. Valkyrie. Val. And let's ask about the cat. There's so many animals on this boat. Alright. Fresh air, cozy bunks, hot tea, the video room. Some pretty interesting tapes down there, actually. Unusual, I mean, weird. Watch out the VCR doesn't take your hand off. Do we want to ask about the VCR or the weird tapes? I guess let's ask about the weird tapes. There's one with this woman. She's just like standing there talking, but you can't really hear her. Interesting. So I can't really tell if our decision was actually changed anything or not. Interestingly, when we selected an act, it asked us which save file we wanted to use, and that is not a thing that I can recall being an issue or an option previously. So yeah, I'm pretty interested in if that means anything, or if that's just kind of a red herring, or how that's going to play out. So we'll see. Okay. Do you have batteries? Of course. What for? Johnny said I could use his tape recorder, but it needs a battery. Oh, fun. Well. Because Shannon just carries batteries in her pocket. It's cool. Alright. So I think we're Ezra now. And we can totally walk around. I want to see if it'll let us walk to the other side of the boat. It seems not to. Maybe it will. Okay. Alright. Got your batteries, small man. Go get you some tape. Interesting. That's the first thing that's felt like a real sort of objective in this very like fetch quest way, which this game doesn't normally do. So I'm just kind of exploring the deck, see if there's other cool stuff. There's the dog! Alright, let's see if we can go up there. Looks like maybe not. So that's also kind of this interesting moment, right, where we don't normally see in games a limitation of where you can go and what you can interact with based on camera angle. So we see it in some games, like Paper Mario is one that immediately comes to mind, but it's always kind of this like novel and interesting thing when we can, right? Like Fez is also a great example of that. And most of those games seem to have been particularly interested in the sort of shift between 2D and 3D. This is kind of a different one in that it feels like you have this moment of the creators of the game have framed this shot very intentionally, and even though a character in this three-dimensional space would be able to traverse it, you can't go outside of the shot. And it's weird because this is this thing that feels a little bit like engaging the author or the death of the author or any of those sort of concepts. Okay, let's talk to these folks. Really? You're entranced. You don't remember this? It's okay. We've all seen a lot of concerts. Got really cosmic. Right, at the flower shop. I remember that show. Sorry, Clara. So, yeah, and I think even though they're not talking explicitly about the incredible, amazing song that we saw, they are reminding us about it, and they are kind of pointing to how strange that was, by kind of saying, oh, you don't remember that, the heavens opened up, it was this cosmic thing, how could you possibly forget that, player? So that's kind of a cool moment as well. Okay. Hold it right here so you don't cover the microphone with your hand. There's like a part of me that was expecting like a Nintendo style thing where Nintendo has all of these games, where you have to blow into the microphone and stuff will happen. There's plenty of tape in there, so don't be stingy with it. Just record anything that catches your ear. It really changes the way you listen, for the better, I mean. Yeah, let's ask if Claire is doing a concert. All the way from Lithuania. Cyrano. The rum colony. Some engine parts about 3 hours ago. I hope we don't stop there too long. My concert is soon and I don't want to keep them waiting. It's river time. Nobody expects you to be punctual. Kind of a nod and a poke to how time is not flowing correctly here on the Echo. See if that cat over there has anything he wants to say. I often use found sounds in my music. If you find some interesting sounds tonight, you can help me out. That's pretty cool. So we have this pretty intense zoom in on the cat. That's pretty cute. Interesting. Okay. So the framing of these shots is so interesting. The camera's moving on its own here. And this has this very sort of like postmodern theater feel, right? Where characters pass each other and now suddenly we're interested in the character that just walked by. Okay, let's see. It's the strangest thing. I can't remember why I came up here. Neither can I. And again, these are decisions that I don't, at this point, I just totally don't expect to actually influence what I'm going to see, but instead I'm interested in what my choices imply about the relationship between Conway and Shannon, right? So I think the romantic in me is maybe pushing for some sort of romantic suggestion, even if there's never a payoff for that. And that is its own sort of pleasure for me being able to select the options that cater to, me as the player having that fantasy, right? As soon as you pass from one room to another, you forget what you wanted. So again, we have a lot of this kind of like engagement with memory and, calling attention to passing in this, in this way that I sort of just mentioned. You walk back out just to remember, like you left a part of your brain behind. Or, the player's focus interaction. Hey, I wonder if I could follow that brain crumb trail all the way back to the room I was born in. Oh, thanks so much, Floop. That's really kind of you. Okay, so, just resting my eyes for a moment, had a weird dream, or you found beer. Ooh, man. So, alright. Let's do the beer. Got caught on some netting and they hauled it aboard. A bounty. So, we know that Conway struggles with alcohol. There's a sign by the cooler. Take what you need and leave the rest. Alright. Shannon leans over the railing and looks at the river. Okay. So this one feels like it has a little bit of like a negative emotional valence, and so I think I'm gonna steer clear of that one. Yeah. He's been exploring. So interesting. Even though we didn't select the Ezra option, it sort of pushed us in that direction anyway. And you sort of start to wonder, like, does that imply a sort of connection between these characters? On a purely practical level, maybe that's just a response that could be applicable to both choices. But either way, it's kind of interesting. Okay. You look like there's something you want to ask. One question. Okay, so, man, these are both really big questions, and I really want to ask both of them. Oh my God. Okay. I feel like it will let us get back around to the hard times one. I'm totally just gonna guess on that. I'm really concerned about Conway's drinking, so I'm gonna ask about this. Well, I didn't. Oh no. I mean, I did, and then I didn't, and then I did again. Oh, there wouldn't for much longer be anywhere to go back to. She went to live with her sister now, and she probably won't remember me for long anyway. Oh my gosh. One time she picked me up out of a ditch by the road, blackout drunk at dawn. I came around later that night. She'd taken care of me. Man, I totally don't know what I want to select here. Alright. Man. So yeah, definitely this sort of emotional climax. Okay, whoa, this is really, really pretty. Um, so I suspect that stack of book-like structure was the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces. Um, the problem is that we listen twice as much as that. We're only telling you half the stories we hear, so kind of a reversal of the classic adage that you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk, right? Um, Kate told me that I ought to have been a photographer. You have an uncanny way of having been in the place at the time the thing happened there, and that's the hardest part of taking a photograph anyway. So yeah, this is a super interesting kind of nod and drawing of our attention um, to stories, right? So what this passage is basically doing is calling our attention to the nature of stories as a thing that people tell to one another. And there are these, this is brilliant writing. So there's kind of these moments where I saw the ghost of Stephen Bishop brew up a batch of white lightning on a raft. And we, as the player, don't know that story, but we sort of don't have to, because we all have this kind of innate understanding of how stories go when you're sitting around and you tell the story of the time, right? And this is basically somebody saying, yeah, I know all the stories about the time. Um, so I really love visually also what this is doing, where we have like these super cool ghostly images of places we have been before that are kind of floating in the water, under the water, through the water. Um, and these are kind of as us as the player, these are our stories about the time, right? Um, so yeah, okay. A couple of them in passing. A pair of traveling musicians whom I often encountered on the river. The others were strangers to me at the time. A young woman, a small boy, an old man whose name I didn't catch. Oh, and a smelly old dog. And now we are another story about the time. So cool. Okay. We docked at a gas station so the mammoth could refuel. Ezra stayed on the tugboat and looked around the map room, or Ezra followed Junebug and Johnny into the gas station. Okay, so this one actually does feel like a real and solid choice. So this is actually a different gas station. This is not the Equinox, but or the Iki. Sorry. Um, do we want to stay on the boat or go to the gas station? I'm kind of curious about the gas station just for sort of the symmetry to gas stations that we previously visited. And let's see what we got. A gas station. So this is a gas station that moves, apparently. And we can ask about that. Could be anywhere up and down the Echo. Just kind of run into it when you need it, or hopefully a little before you need it. I never really pay attention to who's behind the counter, so that's really interesting because that sort of runs oppositional to my experience with country gas stations. So the country store is often kind of like this staple of a country community where people go to kind of hang out and gather. And to not know the people behind the counter of the country store is very strange to me. Okay. It's nice to see you two. Most of my regular passengers must have gotten held up elsewhere in their journey tonight. I think he's a maverick. You don't have any of your own, I mean. I guess not. You two come through here so often. We chat about all kinds of stuff, but I never thought to ask. Okay. That storm upstairs. Upstairs is an interesting word to use there. Okay. I myself don't mind navigating a choppy river, not at all. I've got a good feel for it. Plus, it's better for fungal growth. High water consumes the cave moths, and their wet wings clump together in these little balls of nutrient-dense mushroom food. Oh my. Be ready tomorrow. So both are kind of no for different reasons. I kind of love the mental image of a dog in the sidecar, but okay. I should get back aboard. Let's grab some coffee. Seems like the type who can hold his liquor. Seems like he has a little experience, I mean. I think I'll just watch the lake for a bit. I don't remember us wearing this very fashionable coat, but I like it. Okay. And interesting, so, wow, the sounds are so great. Okay. And the funny thing is that because of the previous comment about how recording things makes you listen to sounds in a new way, it's really difficult for me to tell if the sound design is just really good or if maybe I'm just hyper aware of it right now. So can't talk to the old man or the dog, so let's head back inside. But yeah, that entering of the store noise. So great. All right, let's have some conversations in here. What do you think of that other dog we've got on board, Val? And we have another fantastic conversation with a dog. I came along with that old man drinking up all your beer. Ah, I have been saying this since Act 1, but I absolutely love the design of uh, having this conversation with an animal who's not speaking back. So you're kind of having this conversation with yourself. Um, your choices are not changing the outcome of the story, but they are providing characterization for the character who's speaking. So nice. Okay. Uh, no, I don't want to install updates. Okay. Um, are we looking for crystals? Why would you assume that I'm looking for crystals? We've got them on sale. Nice. Popular crystals. Work on the mammoth. You can add it to your tab. Okay. Ah, I have one of those faces. Forgettable. I wouldn't say that. It's super interesting too because we as the player can't even see their face. So for us, they are actually especially forgettable since we've had no sort of exposition or commentary on how they look. Okay. Um, there's dignity in being forgotten, letting the crowd flow around you unspoiled. A real city, Cleveland, Ohio. Had some family money then, didn't have to work, I lived in hotels. I walked wherever the people were. My only duty was to the crowd. The money ran out, and I dispersed with the rest of them. And I can't hear it fully, but I'm not sure if the song that's playing in the background is the super amazing one that we were talking about earlier. Do I not blend in, or am I not alone? We'll say I'm not alone. So you can travel in company and still be alone. Have equal or lesser symmetry. Interesting. Crystals are rough, dirty, some are damp. They must have come out of the river. So now it's a little unclear as I'm clicking on these. I guess these are the thoughts of the character, which is kind of an interesting shift from the way that we have been interacting with these. So one thing that text and yeah, hi Lemony, good to see you. Yeah, no name. And interestingly, when I clicked on this sort of examine icon, I was really hoping it would be to examine the attendant, and instead it's to examine the crystals. So I actually know more about the crystals at this point than I do about the attendant's sort of physical appearance. And funny enough, the only reason that I actually even care about the attendant's physical appearance is because the game sort of explicitly called attention to the fact that I don't know what it is. And So I was also just about to say that one thing that text is particularly good at that other media are not is the ability to describe thoughts and internal state. So this feels, particularly relevant, right? We're literally using this medium to its strengths, um, and kind of calling attention to this game as a text-based form. Like this is a thing that could not really exist without that, right? Um, Junebug tries to scrape some green algae off a larger specimen. What a depressing outlook, or who knows, maybe he's on to something. Sure. Interesting. It's a decayed plastic bag caught on the rock. Interesting. Floodwater washed you halfway up to sea. Some elephants. Paper flower, I see that. Interesting. Enchanted? Repeating it now, I feel a little silly. Um, Enchanted sounds pretty old-fashioned. Uh, I'm not Loretta, but I think you'll do fine with Enchanted. Great. Having this discussion about the qualities of language, right? Does it feel so when you write character dialogue, the point is to make it sound natural, right? And so it's kind of funny to be calling attention to how unnatural a certain bit of character dialogue sounds. Um, all right. Okay. To be truthful, I couldn't tell you because apparently in this world nobody knows what anybody looks like. I met Loretta on the computer. I guess we spoke there. I guess we spoke through the computer and agreed to meet. I don't know the terminology. Uh, my ex, or maybe I'm her ex, I don't know how to say it. There wasn't even such a thing as computers at all. Hmm. So, yeah, I guess I'm interested in Greta. I'm sure she'll understand. Uh, yeah. We're playing June Vega's the nicer person here. Okay. uh, okay, so we have two ways to reject him, and one is slightly nicer than the other. I'm gonna go with that option, but it is kind of interesting. Yeah, like as this kind of having a power of fantasy of sort of playing the characters, sort of directing the characters, um, we do get to make this choice of how to turn this person down. And then it turns out they weren't hitting on us at all, or so they say. Um, okay. No goofballs. Interesting. So, this is a really great characterization as of a dating paragraph, and I love that this is an option. The no goofballs at the end, right, is definitely a thing that people talk about in terms of things like, no fatties and that kind of sort of terrible thing. So I am really happy that I get to pick the goofballs, the sort of stand-in for. You might miss out on some really great goofballs. It's true. All right. Uh, really though, I don't know this person and don't feel super comfortable telling them how to write their dating ad. Um, all right. The sound is so good. So good. Okay. What's that? It's a crystal. Good luck. So now we have Johnny. Head inside. Where did these crystals come from? Uh, yeah. The travelers come to me. Um, yeah, I feel like I want to ask about the attendant specifically. And the attendant totally shut me down. Okay. uh, all right. Nice. So, now we have another moment of Junebug talking to the dog instead. Um, and I love the opening of "Hey, did Johnny talk your ear off?" Because of course we did. And okay. Uh, Different thoughts for different listeners. Ah, I was kind of hoping that would keep going. But okay. Wow. um, okay, that was a brilliant little bit of writing there that felt very modernist, but also very Twitter at the same time, which was kind of great. Okay. Uh, okay. 5 years old. Interesting. More examples of this kind of what actually is this space and setting that we're in. Uh, okay. A large bag of apples. Totally adrift. Yeah, the computer is not as laggy. So, part of the slow setup today that I sort of apologize for was getting new stuff installed on my new PC. And my new PC has been awesome, except for Windows 10, which has been a thing. But and that's also why I'm on the headset today and why, unfortunately, our audio quality is not quite as good as it normally is. So, so hopefully that should be fixed. But it's kind of looking like I might have to do a reinstall of Windows 10. So, it's a thing. It's a thing. But yeah, so this computer though is really awesome and should be really great for streaming. And I should be able to stream really awesome stuff, including like, actual like top of the line fast moving games. So that'd be pretty exciting. Um, And so, yeah, this exposition that we're getting to also, it's that thing that I was talking about earlier, right? Where it feels a bit like he's telling us the story about the time, um, and then sort of succinctly summing that whole story up with like this one sort of catchphrase, gigantic word, right? Um, yeah, and I actually totally should post some pictures to Instagram or social media of the new computer. I built probably like the femmest, girliest gaming rig ever. Um, and yeah, I'm totally that person that never wanted to have the really like tricked out gaming computer with ridiculous lights and stuff like that. Partly because my computer was always sort of doubling as a work computer, and partly because it was often sort of on display in my living room and that sort of thing. But now I have a work laptop that's, tasteful and all of that, and have my uh, like an office that's a separate space from the living space when I have people over. So I may or may not have put together the femmest, most ridiculous, over the top gaming rig ever, and I'm really excited about it. And parts of it kind of look like a Razer advertisement, and yeah, it's awesome, and everything's pink and turquoise, and I love it. Uh, okay, anyway, back to the game. Uh, yeah, okay. That frog we had for a bit. So that's a really interesting comparison to make. Um, and then we can say we thought it was a toad. Uh, Man, so there's different sort of emotional valences attached to these, right? Yeah, toads are bigger. That seems nicer. Okay. Seemed more like a cat. I'm kind of interested in why a frog. He liked to talk, which is funny because I actually was really like, I don't know. Okay. Frog or a cat or an iguana or something. Um, yeah, not exactly. We can play. Play is such a loaded word. Okay. Uh, Not lonely, just curious. With another person to play with, what else could we be? Interesting. All right. You really think so? I thought I'd have to wear you down. Okay. So, so the mammoth calls to us. Thanks, Luke. See that small brick building? It used to be an upholstery shop. Very skilled taxidermist. Interesting. Interesting. Still sees active use. Elise is the resident artist, though. She's not the owner of the shop. So, before I go on, I want to talk a little bit more about the attendant, even though I talked about him a whole bunch. So, this sort of like conventional wisdom for writing characters. There's an adage that sort of says that readers won't care about a character unless they're named. And you know, obviously, as with all writing rules, you know, these things are constantly broken. But this feels like a very explicit example of that, where I care a lot about this attendant because the attendant was set up to me as a character that I wasn't going to care about, right? The attendant doesn't have a name, but I sort of already care about the attendant more than Elise, who just came up and is named. And, you know, that may change. I may get to know Elise. Um, but we're sort of already kind of overwhelmed by other names as well. Sure. Mostly the restaurant. So we can check out this mysterious video collection. Or we can go to the rum colony. And think it's kind of like a frame narrative. Yeah, definitely. It definitely does feel that way. And it does kind of have a Heart of Darkness feel, right? Like floating down the river and having this this frame narrative. Certainly. So, and keeping in mind that a lot of times when we're talking about these things, we are talking about readings or sort of critical analyses that may not be what the artist intended. And depending on what school of criticism you subscribe to, there's a very real argument for the author's intent kind of being divorced from the meaning that is made in the between the artifact and the reader. So if you kind of have these like three levels of meaning making, right? You have what's in the author's head, and then there's a process of transcription into the artifact, and the author is trying to get across certain meanings in that process. And then there's the process from the artifact to the reader, and that process, the reader is necessarily like pulling certain meanings out of the artifact, and from point A to point B, there's often things lost or things inserted, but there's not really a right, you know. So when we say maybe it's not explicitly a reference, well, it can be, right? And this is also why I talk a lot about kind of viewing things as lenses rather than boxes, because you know, maybe this was very explicitly intended to be in this postmodern theater tradition, which I suspect it was, because there are like a lot of references, right? So maybe that was an intended reading, but if I want to read this through the lens of, you know, queer feminism, right? Like, even if that's not a reading that the author intended, that doesn't necessarily make it any less valid of a reading, right? Because I'm not trying to put a box around this that says this is a queer feminist piece. I'm just saying, hey, if we look at it with these tools that come from this tradition, here are the things we can gain from that. Yeah. And so, yeah, so that was my big spiel about author intent, saying that as a person who makes creative media. And so, yeah, so what decision are we going to have? Both of these are things that have been brought up to us, so I'm really interested in both. So I think there's a part of me that's really invested in this part of the story with Conway and the drinking. So I'm going to go to the rum colony because I suspect that is where that portion of the story is most likely to play out. Yeah, definitely. And I think Lemony, that's a really great point about art in general. So, you know, I think a lot of the is X, Y, or Z art arguments are really silly for this exact reason, right? Because to me, an art object is a thing that you engage with and it makes you feel something. And that feeling can be anything from brilliant insight to, you know, to feeling a particular emotion or anything in between. And to me, that's what art is. And to other people, maybe art is a different thing, and that is 100% valid as their opinion. I think when you get to a certain point, you start to. Nice, we have our flashlight back. When you get to a certain point of deconstructing your ideas and why you believe what you believe, you sort of eventually come down to like core beliefs or your sort of internal ideologies, really. And so for me, like one of those is sort of, this is what I believe art to be, and you can't argue with me about that because it's what it is, right? Um, okay. Our friend Cyrano is booked here tonight. He's pretty good. I really want to take this moment to point out the language in this game and how phenomenal it is. So Cyrano feels very much like a reference to Cyrano de Bergerac, and the language around booked, right? Like they don't explicitly mean codex book, but like the fact that they're using language that recalls that makes you sort of subconsciously think about that thing. It's brilliant. Okay, he's a wizard. Yeah, is this similar to the distinction between capital A art and lowercase a art? So I think it depends on who you're talking to, right? So for a lot of people, capital A art is sort of the institution of art. So by the institution of art, I mean there are certain institutions at play that validate art. So art that exists in a white cube of a high status and is talked about by certain people that represent various institutional forces. So whether that's art professors or art historians or fashionable curators or wealthy collectors or any of those people, that whole machine is sort of encompassed in capital A art. So when we talk about issues around capital A art and whose work is engaged with in that context, that's generally what people are talking about. And then lowercase a art, to me, feels like a different thing. And maybe, I guess that's maybe what you're getting at with your comment as well. Um, so yeah, let's ask if they're coming ashore. Kate says just to wander back whenever. This is a take it easy kind of stop. Something about this spot is like wax in the ear when it comes to timetables and responsibilities. Okay. So let's wander around. We have a flashlight. I think it's really beautiful without it, so I'm gonna not use it. So the flashlight actually feels a little bit like the visual equivalent of that thing that we've been talking about with the text and the choices, where me turning the light on or off may mechanically make a difference, but I am, as the player, am sort of in this director role, and I think it's more beautiful in this shot when I don't have the light on. So the game is actually kind of, it feels like giving me the option to decide that. And I think I'm going to be a little bit disappointed if that's undermined by it having like a very explicit mechanical purpose. So he's just kind of laying there. It's unclear to me if it's just kind of passed out or what's going on, but okay, we'll talk to Will. Happy to be in the here and now. It's interesting because in dialogue, I'm not really sure how to read that haha. It's one of those things that you say over text or Twitter or whatever, and that has kind of a different meaning from saying it out loud. Uh, So I don't know, it's kind of funny to see in dialogue because when I read dialogue, I'm usually trying to think about how it would sound if a person actually said it out loud. Um, okay. And I respect that enough not to press the subject. Interesting. So I kind of wonder if this is a little bit of a comment on boringness in this game, right? Like this is not a game that has kind of action in the way we think of like with action games. And I can certainly see this game receiving criticism around being boring, and and in some ways this feels a little bit like a response to that criticism. Um, Even if that might be a little bit of a straw man, I'm not really sure. Uh, right, and then we have these sort of comments on outward reflecting and inward reflecting, which feels a little bit like what I was sort of just talking about with text being a great medium for kind of the internal dialogue of characters, right? And so we have this exposition also that is not sure whether it wants to be inward reflecting or outward reflecting. Um, okay. So I'm not sure if I agree. Interesting, and then it kind of just doesn't go on. So yeah, I think the seasoned game player in me has a really hard time just not turning the light on at all. Like my impulse in as the director of this scene is to keep the light off, but the gamer in me wants to keep checking to see if it's going to do something. Okay. The water is fine, invigorating. It wants makes me want to run. So more horse imagery. What's in these drinks? Okay. Uh, so Rick has passed out drunk. Yeah, so we have a reference to offices and Lula. So this is actually kind of a nice way to, one, sort of remind the player things that have happened in the past, but also to draw symmetry and repetition in terms of storytelling. Um, uh, oh man, I can't pass this option up. That's just so good. Okay. It's a work in progress. Um, what have you been working on? Oh. And we never find out. Okay, lots of conversations here. So kind of interesting how much characterization is also sort of being conveyed in the posture of these characters. So we don't get a lot of detail in terms of how they look. Um, so kind of all of the characterization happens through the visual characterization, I mean, happens through their postures and their animations. Um, what's in these drinks is in fact rarely a question you want to hear. Good point. Uh, the polar ice caps, the ones all the way at the top. Wow, so these two options are definitely kind of different on emotional valences. Yeah, you can recycle. have another Mai Tai. So the bar is crowded tonight. He likes to spread out. Which was actually the comment that I was getting to with the posture thing, right? So we have this guy who's very sort of man spreaded, if you will, um, and there's sort of a an implication with that posture. Um, the toxic runoff has decimated the deer population. Oh no, I believe them. Acid rain, you know. Heard it in a recent study. Interesting. Sunny, you're insufferable. Let's talk to Dawn. I like her. Toxic runoff. That's his latest rant. Takes bits and pieces of things he reads and synthesizes them into some grand theory, and it's always the end of the world. That feels like a pretty pointed bit of social commentary. Who could know that stuff? Um, yeah, so this is also a pretty common tactic in literary media, right? Having these two characters with these different points of view, and then you, as the reader, are sort of able to read into that whichever author's intention feels the most salient to you. Okay. Yeah, definitely political commentary, right? Um, uh, how are you, Patch? For now, he's selling flowers on the river. I've got time, busy night. I'm kind of curious what's in the drinks. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so let's see. Uh, what is that like? Uh, okay, now I'm just curious. If this is just gonna keep generating cocktails, that would be pretty amazing. Okay. Yeah, what's that like? Oh, plastic skull on top. Okay. Uh, I mean, now, like, the procedural mechanisms have revealed themselves, and now I'm going to exploit them. So this is obviously not a conversation that I would expect the characters to actually be having, and that's pretty transparent, and I'm sort of okay with it. And so that's kind of interesting because uh, that's kind of different to the sorts of interactions that we've been having with the dialogue system previously. So all of the drinks are super similar. Let's see what we got. They just really like blue curacao. I'm kind of curious just how many are in here. Sorry if this is really boring to watch on the stream, but especially since we have Jagpag in here who does this kind of thing. Right, so green curacao. I love these titles. They're fantastic. So I suspect this is procedurally generated, and there's probably a ton of different ways that it could combine these things. Um, and it seems like the names may be generated as well. So this is kind of an interesting moment where the game has communicated to us that it doesn't actually matter which thing we choose, and procedural generation is actually really great for conveying that. So I'm thinking of Dietrich Swankofer's game Interruption Junction has this procedurally generated text that is kind of this stand-in for babble that is very clear to a player that it doesn't actually mean anything because the seams of the procedural generation start to show. And this also kind of has that similar feel, right? So no drinks for us, and we're gonna go. Okay. So glad to see you. So, oh, that's not the one I actually meant to pick, but that's okay. If you're gonna drink like that, just drink. Just a humble artist. Can't look like you care about it, even if it's your livelihood. A crowd can smell economic precarity and it turns them off. Wow, that is a pull quote from this stream. That's so interesting. It's no fun to give someone money if they really need it. Too much responsibility. Man, so yeah, again, it feels like a lot of the characters are kind of making these jabs that feel like actually very poignant social commentary, and particularly currently in an age of Patreon and people, sort of trying to make money off of certain kinds of labor. It's really interesting. But at the same time, that's a comment that's broad enough that it could refer to all sorts of different things. So, yeah, really, really great writing. Oh man, and now we get some awesome music. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of sit here and listen to it for a second. Okay. This is also the first time I think I've actually seen our character. This particular character, anyway. Who looks amazing and goofy. I kind of want this shirt now. Alright. Shouldn't have to do that. Had to hurt. The unsteady steadying the unsteady. It's probably a $5 bill somewhere just floating up and down the river from tip jar to musician to tip jar to musician. Interesting. That also feels like a super pointed Patreon thing. And again, like, not to say at all that the authors intended for that to be, but maybe they did or didn't, but I think there's certainly a reading in there for that. And particularly in, what Lee Alexander has talked about as kind of the I can't remember the term she used, but this kind of familiarity economy, right, where fans want to get to know the creators that they're supporting on this like very personal level, and it's funny because actually most Patreons that I've seen are sort of written in this appeal to people's charity from this place of like desperation, really, and that is certainly one means of writing that sort of thing. Okay, so now we're jumping Shannon again. Yeah, slow jam this KRZ scene. That's basically what we're doing, right? And interesting because this actually also has kind of a Donkey Kong Country feel to me a little bit, which is some of my favorite music from video games ever. Okay. And there's a recorder, actually. Huh. Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's actually not just on Patreon though. I think that's also sort of a currency that creators are dealing in general with this kind of familiarity economy, right? So okay, so I love this sort of lighting level design here, and it stops there. Anyway, yeah. I think, you know, with lots of bands or personalities or whoever that have Instagrams and Snapchats and whatever, there is this kind of promise of authenticity that you don't get from their finished creative product. So you know, so like with Snapchat, you're seeing these snapshots from their life, right? And certain forms of social media, we're very used to this feeling very curated and polished. Like I would argue at this point, Facebook feels pretty curated and polished, and particularly for fan pages, right? But and Instagram kind of also feels pretty polished. And is that Ezra just kind of wandering around? Yes, it is. What you doing? Uh, but certain forms of social media seem to be kind of differentiating themselves through this promise of authenticity and off the cuffness, right? So I think live streaming is kind of that for YouTube, and now there are even offshoots of streaming that are promising more off the cuffness than what, say, Twitch is providing. Yeah, that's also a really great point, Lemony. I haven't gotten a chance to control Conway yet. Cool, so we're still kind of hanging out. So let's go back down this way. Let's examine. Untouched drink sits on the table, forgotten or abandoned, or simply wasted. Okay. And also, that was sort of wonderfully framed and designed there with this particular lantern kind of leading me off screen in the same way that, like, in a Mario game, you would see a coin kind of down in the bottom of a pit would sort of lead you to additional content. Okay. There she is. You have to try one of these flower drinks. No, Conway. I feel like I could drink 100 of them. Please don't. It's not one of those. Not one of those really strong drinks. Just sort of doesn't taste like a flower, I mean. Not like a flower smells. My first long haul gigs ended in a crash. Flipped a trailer. Oh no. I don't like where this is going. Never worn a seatbelt since. And if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, chat, this is probably arising because the person in the factory made us drink. So you'll remember there was that moment where I, as the player, actually lost control of the cursor, and the cursor sort of moved over, and the drink kind of consumed itself, right? And since then, Conway has been drinking non-stop, and right. Yeah. One of those old guys. I don't think so. No. Oh no. No. Alright, well I guess let's ask questions. Yeah, I'd be interested in you talking more about that, Jagpag. Uh, Conway's struggle to talk about how the drink is good. So I actually read that as an indication that he was drunk. Um, and but I think you're actually kind of onto something too. Like English just doesn't have very good words to indicate flavor. So yeah, I would be interested in you sharing more about that. Um, going to sit and look at the water. Conway's kind of dismissing us, and it's making me feel really sad. I keep following these tiki lanterns. Ezra's just running around. You do you. Okay. Getting kind of dark. I am actually going to turn on the light. And yeah, so I've kind of just run out of tiki lamps and can't seem to actually click on stuff over there. So we're going to turn that off. Stay near the water. What's really interesting to me also is how even when I turn it on, it doesn't actually increase the visibility in the level at all. And I keep wanting it to, like I keep turning it on, but it sort of is very intently like not having that purpose. Um, so it looks like I can kind of jump ahead with this, but I kind of want to keep exploring a little bit just to see what else. I think we've already talked to that couple. All right, we're gonna go. Well, that was a pleasant detour. And this is such a great moment too because the game sort of told me that I would sort of know when I was ready to leave, uh, and I do. um, so yeah, and that's kind of now, but I'm not really seeing how I'm supposed to. Ah. Interesting. So everything is all creepy and deserted now. I suspect we could probably do more stuff up over here in this now deserted area that's still just kind of recording. Recordings have been very creepy in this game, I will say. I want to keep talking to Conway though. I'm really invested in this. Okay. Who are you talking to? Oh. It's nothing. Okay. All right. Moving on to our next location. This is so beautiful. It's really just visually beautiful. Underneath that quarter-acre swarm of moths. Diamondback moth. Sunflower orchard. There's no sign of a person or anything. The lamps are gone now. It's really interesting too how this game seems to be using kind of mold as a stand-in for like aging and growth, but it's kind of using growth in the way that a lot of narratives use decay, which I also find kind of interesting, because normally like an injection of life is not really what we think of, but it does have that sort of like overgrown, overrun sort of connotation, right? And this is kind of interesting in it giving us this opportunity for exposition. We're choosing now like the path for the narrator to take, telling us about the time. Being for rude shock. Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Jagpag, and I also similarly find the same thing with sound, and I'd be really interested in your take on that as well. But I think a thing that's interesting is that sound has developed this kind of analogous vocabulary around it. So like musicians can talk about like a round sound or a bright sound, and that is kind of this literacy that you as a musician have to cultivate, right? Like people who aren't really musicians don't necessarily know what a round sound means until they hear a round sound paired against something that's not. Valkyrie and the other dog lounged below deck. I will always choose the dog options, just FYI. Okay, so I'm probably going to stop the stream there. Yeah, the sunflower story was really cool, by the way. I kind of was not really commenting on it as much, but yeah, it was really cool. And I really love this this game doing this. Okay, so the sort of slow zoom in there was very dramatic. Oh, oh my. That was so great. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful. Oh, that was fantastic. Okay, so I really am stopping the stream though. So if you have any final questions or comments or anything that you want to get in before the stream ends, now is probably the time because of the chat delay. But I'm so glad to be back to streaming this game. I'm really excited about it. I'm so invested in, particularly in Conway's drinking story and in his relationship with Shannon to see how it kind of changes. So yeah, let's say Ezra taught us a card game. And then we just get this scene. Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice. Yeah, and then we all sit around and there's the animals and Ezra kicking little feet. Oh my god, I want whatever deck they're using. That's so beautiful and poetic. What a beautiful way to talk about cards. Okay. There are a lot of suits in the game, but I really, oh my gosh, I really love this. Okay. What do I expect in Act 4 based on the 5x structure? So, actually, that answer changes depending on what medium we're talking about. But generally speaking, you have kind of a dramatic arc wherein the sort of climax or lowest point, or the sort of like how are we ever going to resolve this, would happen at the end of Act 3, which I think kind of held pretty true, right? Because at the end of Act 3 um, we saw like Conway had just taken a drink and was kind of placed in indentured servitude, and all of these really terrible things were happening, right? So in Act 4, what, yeah, definitely. And so in Act 4, we would expect kind of the untangling of that, to see kind of how that sort of lowest point moment is going to unravel. So this is the point at which kind of all of that buildup is starting to untangle itself, right? And then depending on whether we're in a more sort of literary 5 act um, 5 act structure, or like a more sort of Hollywood based one, would sort of determine at which point the denouement begins, which is sort of the coming down of dramatic tension. But right now we're kind of at the crust of that. We are in the process of seeing how all of these things have kind of culminated, and it's really interesting also to see it kind of churning through these scenes really fast, right? Because like if we're looking at each scene as kind of either building or releasing dramatic tension, this is kind of a really interesting way to be powering through lots of scenes really fast, and also leaves us kind of wondering, in terms of pacing, what is each of these scenes doing, right? Um, yes, definitely. Uh, yeah, exactly. So the climax is drinking the shift drink and getting caught up with the skeletons, exactly. Um, so, yeah, exactly. The scenes on the ship are shorter in this way that feels sort of uh, slightly like montage, and is almost stripped down to like this beat level. So in writing something like a screenplay, you normally are thinking of that writing in terms of beats. So each beat is either adding to or decreasing the dramatic tension. And like this is almost we haven't gone through very many of the really short scenes yet, but that previous scene was so short that it actually just felt like a beat. And I'm really interested in the next stream of kind of looking at this particular section and seeing how that holds, or how it affects pacing and tension. So thank you all so much for coming back and joining me for my first stream back. On Friday, I'll be back over at Scholars Play, so definitely check that out. That's at 4 p.m. Pacific. And then on Monday, we will continue this, and it should be really awesome. So thanks so much, everybody, and thanks for bearing with me with new stream sort of technical stuff. But as you've already noticed, it's not lagging as much, so hopefully this is going to be great things going forward. Um, so I don't have a closing title card for you, so unfortunately the stream's just going to kind of end when I close it. But we'll fix that for next time, and thank you so much for hanging out and watching. If you're not already following Cerebral Arcade on various social media to keep updated on things, you totally should, and you should subscribe and follow on Twitch for reminders when we go live. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys later.